For people not familiar with the photography, or the history of photography, who is Todd Webb?
I can start if that's helpful. Todd Webb is an American photographer who really began to make images after the Great Depression, when he lost his job. And he studied making photographs with Ansel Adams and became good friends with the celebrated American photographer, Harry Callahan. And after serving in World War II, he returned to the United States and made the pilgrimage to New York, where Alfred Stieglitz was living at the time, and paid homage to Stieglitz as American photographers did at that moment. And then he really turned towards becoming a photographer and making images as his sole focus in the mid-1940s, after he was 40 years old. So he had many different lives and came to photography rather late. Stieglitz was famously married to Georgia O'Keeffe, who became a very dear friend of Todd's. And he had many commissions, including working for the Standard Oil Company, the Marshall Plan, and then also for the United Nations, which of course is the topic of our conversation today.
So to then ask a follow-up question precisely about Todd Webb's photography on Africa, this collection came out after these photos that he took of the continent resurfaced after 50 years. So where were they for 50 years? How come they were only rediscovered in 2017?
Aimée, I can start. So I managed the Todd Webb archive for 5 years while I was in graduate school. It was my graduate school job, and I never saw these while I worked there. And they came back to the archive 2 years after I had stopped working there. There was a negotiation about part of Todd's body of work in the 70s where he was selling it, and it was a deal that didn't go as well as he would have liked, and a number of the images in his archive, at that point he was in his 70s, in the 1970s, because he was born in 1905, he let a number of images go without ever getting paid for them. And I think he kind of came to terms with the fact that, like, it wasn't, he had done what he wanted to in his life, and he felt like he didn't need to recover them. And Betsy Evans Hunt, who now runs the Todd Webb archive, I think was able to relocate the images in, I think 4 years ago, and able to purchase them back and reacquire them into the archive. When she repurchased them, she did not know that the negatives of his 5-month journey on the continent
were part of it.
This larger reacquisition package, basically. And so she received, I think, 5 steamer trunks. Was it 5? Around 5 steamer trunks. I mean, like old steamer trunks that you would put on a boat to go across the Atlantic. And in them were these color negatives that she had never seen before as a part of his archive. So it was a completely new addition and window into who Todd was as a photographer and the projects that he worked on.
Yeah, there's the story of how she found the photographs in someone's basement. That's in the book. It's a great story. So one of the things you do deal with in the book, so sort of like in the opening and the introduction of the book, is you sort of kind of confront this question of the photographer or the artist as an autonomous maker. Like, do you want to say a little bit about that? Is it because it had to do with images about Africa, or is this part of sort of just critiquing that notion of the photographer as an autonomous maker?
I think one of we had so many conversations throughout the 3 years that over 3 years that we worked on the project. And one was really just acknowledging the fact that photographs are never neutral. So both considering, and one of the things that was really important to us was considering each of these images as having, as being in many ways multivocal. There's both the perspective of the UN, because this is a UN commission, so he's there doing a job specifically for the UN. And then you have Todd's eye as a photographer. And then we also really wanted to tell the story of the photographs themselves, what's happening in them, but also to try to give the photographs some life and allow the photographs to speak for themselves in a way. It had to do with many different ways of being and thinking about the voices in the photographs that couldn't speak. And this is where, for us, it became very important for the project to be collaborative. And we very much see this as, Erin and I might be listed as editors, but this is very much a collaborative project.
Yeah, and can I just add to that quickly, that I think really we from the beginning of the writing of the book, we really agreed that dealing with this material required a methodological shift, right? A shift where we would acknowledge that this could never be one point of view, right? And that point of view, as Aimée said, the collaborative aspect of the project is the project for us, right? So the inclusion of many different authors in the book project, but then also the exhibition that accompanies the book, which is open right now at the Minneapolis Institute of Art, will travel to the National Museum of Tanzania and open in Dar es Salaam on December 9th of this year. And the curators at the museum there who we are working with will install their own version of the show. And so it was really important to us to have this be a project that really didn't propose the artist's own vision, but acknowledge the fact that this was a commission project that was paid for by the UN, and his itinerary was created by the UN, and now the photographs operate as something outside of that commission, and acknowledging the different perspectives into that.
Yeah, including the artist's vision. So you have the photographer's vision, the UN's vision, you have, and Todd Webb was really somebody who was the thoughtful seer through his photographic lens. So there's that, but then he's also photographing something that is a commission.
Right, and this I wanted the producer to put back the image of the Texaco of the gas station, and maybe if you could because in the book you really kind of if you can use this image just to kind of talk a little bit about that politics of the photographers, this autonomous maker. Maybe if you I'm going to do a bad job, so just quickly, if you want to take us through this photo, for example.
And I can start, but Erin, you'll jump in too. We've had so many conversations about this image. This image, I think it's one of both of our favorites. This image is such a great example of the many ways that, that we can view any one photograph. We could read this at a surface level, and we don't really know what's happening for the man who's holding the pump. We don't really, and actually, if you can see, it might be hard to see on the screen, but if you look really closely, there's a man in the window in the Texaco station. There's two men off to the left. So we don't really know what he's thinking. And if we read this at the surface level, this kind of contains all this beautiful, happy optimism of the 1950s. But there's also so many different ways to read it. And maybe, Erin, I could pass it off to you. We've talked about the idea of it also looks like an advertisement for a multinational corporation for Texaco. Right. And we've also, Erin did a really nice essay in the book looking at kind of the impact of extractive industries on the continent. And maybe I'll hand that off to you. That was my baton to you, Erin.
I think one of the things that is so compelling for me about the images, the photographs, is the duality that exists, the tension that exists between how incredibly luscious and, dare I say, beautiful the photographs are, right? Almost indulgent in their colors and their composition. And yet there's always this other story that sits below that surface, right? And it's like what Tina Campt would call the quiet, right? And so we've tried really hard to acknowledge that tension and that ambivalence where Todd's photographs can be both things at once, be both beautiful and demonstrating the trauma and violence of extractive industries on the continent.